Howdy, everybody. Welcome back. This is part two of the World War II lesson. I'm going to start with our map today of the threats to peace in Europe. But before we get started with that, guys, I want to ease all of your minds. Your quiz today, don't adjust your dial. You're hearing it right. Your quiz today is a reward. I want to thank all of you for, and I mean it, for taking this class seriously. A lot of you, have been, without even being asked, turning in all your work, doing everything the right way, asking questions, putting forth great effort. And even those of you who maybe got off to a slow start, man, I'm telling you what, you really picked it up. And I appreciate the fact that you're trying to get your work submitted. So I'm going to reward the group. All right, your quiz today, guys. Basically, I'm going to reward you for just paying attention. I'm going to go through all the answers to this assignment that I gave you earlier in the week. And if you can submit it to me, whether in an email or in your Google Doc, just share it with me after I give you the correct answers, even if you're missing one or two. I'm going to count that as your quiz. I want to reward your hard work. You guys are taking my advice and you're living up to the example of being the greatest generation. So hang in there and keep up the great work, guys. Remember, the most important thing now is that we have context. Now, another thing I want to talk to you about is one of the things I'm going to discuss with you today is the Holocaust. It's a scary, sad, depressing concept. So I apologize if it gets a little dark. It's one of those unfortunate things about being a history teacher. It's the blessings and the curses, right? The curse of being a history teacher is that I have to constantly expose my mind to the negative aspects of history. I don't feel good about studying the Holocaust, but I feel like I am obligated to because I need to understand it enough to explain it to people like you so that you can understand why we need to know about it. And the reason we need to learn about things like the Holocaust and 9/11 and things like that, while they're scary and sad, we have to understand that if we do not pay attention, we will be doomed to repeat the mistakes of people before us, right? The saying, the quote is true. Those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. All right? So hang in there, pay attention, and bear with me. The first thing I want to start with today is a map that details threats to European peace. All right? Now, we're going to talk about the Allies and the Axis powers today and all of that. This map kind of shows you those threats to peace in Europe at the time. Now, the blue areas are what you would call the Allies. Great Britain, part of South Italy, Soviet Union, later the United States. The red areas are what we would call the Axis powers, right? Now, to make it even simpler, the red areas on this map, that's Nazi Germany. Okay, after Germany invades Poland in 1939 and starts infiltrating all of Europe, what you see in red is what you would refer to as Nazi Germany. Okay? And you may notice that there's one little spot here in the middle, and if you haven't, remember, find your landmark, right? Italy, the boot kicking the rock, right? There's our boot. And right north of Italy here is this little tan area that hasn't been colored in by blue or red, right? That's Switzerland. Switzerland remained neutral. Switzerland is pretty awesome, right? Show you the Swiss Army knife my dad got me for Christmas a couple years back, right? Quick story about the Swiss Army. When Hitler was invading Europe, he was threatening Switzerland that they essentially need to join or die, and Switzerland said, bring it on. And the Swiss had a very small country, but a very strong army. They were great marksmen, and they used their topography and their geography to their advantage. One of the things that the Swiss did when Hitler threatened to invade, Hitler was marching some of his troops, not Hitler himself, but his Nazi generals, were marching the German army, the Nazis, up on a narrow mountain path. And right as they had crossed over into Swiss territory, the German soldiers were looking around, they knew where they were, and all of a sudden, somebody drops, right? Boom, falls to the ground. And a few minutes after the guy hits the ground, they hear a distant gunshot. And then another German Nazi falls to the ground, and in the distance they hear. The Swiss army was so far away. They were hidden up in the mountains, in the Alps, dressed in all white. You couldn't tell where they were. They were so far away. The Nazis could not hear the rifle shot until, somebody had actually been put down by that shot. Now, it's reasons like that the Swiss army never surrendered to the Germans. The Germans realized it was probably a good business decision not to invade Switzerland, and therefore the Swiss army remained neutral through all of World War II. Just shows you that sometimes when the bully on the block comes around, sometimes you act peacefully, don't join sides, and, well, defend yourself when you have to. So that's a story I always share every year about the Swiss Army. All right, now let's get into our lesson for today. As you can see, I'm wearing my American flag hat today and my salute to service Bears hoodie. All right, all about the Allies today. So who are these people? Well, the Allied forces during the time period are the United States eventually, all right, England, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union, all right. The Axis powers would be Germany, Italy, and then later Japan. Now, these are the big three, all right? This is what we call them. Now, this is a form of alliances, and an unlikely one forms here with the Allies. You wouldn't expect that the United States would form an alliance with the Soviet Union, Russia, all right? But the Soviet Union, United States, and Great Britain saw the evil in the Nazi Party and realized it needed to be stopped for whatever reason. However they got to those conclusions, they did come to the agreement, though they were completely different countries with completely different ideas. They all could agree that the Nazis needed to go, all right? Now, this becomes more of a threat. The United States actually gets involved, all right, after Japan joins the Axis powers. On December 7th, 1941, in Pearl Harbor, which is a Navy air base out in Hawaii, the Japanese surprise attacked at Pearl Harbor, all right, destroying most of the United States Pacific Fleet of the Navy, thinking that this would be a death blow to the United States before we could even get involved. Ironically, though, one of the supreme leaders in the Japanese Imperial Army said, "I fear we may have awoke a sleeping giant," and that sleeping giant was the United States. And those prophetic words would prove to be true. All right? Now, one of the things that comes to light as the United States get involved into World War II is the Holocaust. Now, the Holocaust was the mass murder of Jews by Nazis during World War II. This is what I started talking about in my last lesson with you. All right? This is one of the darkest phases in United States world history. Over 6 million Jews, and this is an estimate, all right? The number may be far higher. This is what we know of. Over 6 million Jews were killed, murdered during the Holocaust. And we're not talking about soldiers here. We're talking about innocent people. Families ripped apart, brothers and sisters torn from each other's arms, some never to see each other again, husbands and wives and grandparents and children ripped from each other's arms, some to never reunite again. Absolutely awful scenario. When you are in 8th grade, you will travel to the Holocaust Museum if you are able, and you'll learn more of it at that point. But I do need to show you a few of these things here. The living conditions in these ghettos, in these concentration camps, was absolutely awful. People were not treated as human beings, okay? And it was very dark times. Now, these were rumors, right? And countries, civilized nations like the United States would hear these things, and it's one of those situations where you almost don't want to believe what is true. And it wasn't until these concentration camps were starting to get liberated, and when the Allied forces were marching into these territories and discovering these camps, which were largely being conducted secretly, and information was really tight on these things, and it wasn't until diaries of some of these Jewish survivors. The Diary of Anne Frank is one of the most famous that you will actually read in 8th grade, detailing her account of hiding in an attic to avoid being captured by the Nazis. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, the movie Schindler's List, all go through in pretty graphic detail, what the Holocaust was all about. When these camps were liberated, all right, one of the most infamous was Auschwitz, right, with the railroad tracks going in, where Jewish Holocaust prisoners would be put into boxcars and taken into the prison camp to be forced to work or other. And nobody really ever left these concentration camps unless, in an extenuating circumstance, they were being transferred somewhere else and then eventually, thankfully, liberated at the end of the war. This is a picture of shoes. Just a room filled with shoes that were stripped from people. that were taken into these concentration camps, never to put their shoes on again. When you see images like this, it really puts in perspective how big the number 6 million actually is. You have to remember these things, so that history does not repeat it. Now, you might wonder, why are there so many pictures? These are essentially bunks, all right? The trough in the middle would be a restroom, okay? People were forced to live and stacked inside of these bunks. These were their beds that they would sleep in at night between their forced labor during the day. When General Eisenhower, later President Eisenhower, the commander of the Allied forces, an American general, when he and his troops discovered these concentration camps, he ordered every available journalist with every ounce of film that they had, whether it be photograph or film, to come in and photograph everything that they saw. Do not alter these images. Whatever you see, I want you to photograph it. And the journalist said to him, "Sir, some of these things that we're going to be photographing are graphic. These are not things." He said, "I don't care. I want you to document this. And I want you to go to the villages near here, to these towns that knew that these things were happening. And I want you to bring these people in. I want you to walk them through. And I want them to see what was going on a few miles away from them, that they turned their backs on or chose to ignore, or hopefully not, but may have actually supported. And I want these people to assist us in the cleanup." And they said, "Sir, why? Why are you doing this? Why are you forcing civilians?" He said, "Because someday somebody's going to say this never happened, and I want proof that it did." And here we are, less than 100 years later, right? And there are already people out there saying the Holocaust never happened. There's a mountain of evidence that suggests otherwise, right? So this is the reason we talk about these things. And thankfully, right, after the United States gets involved in the war after Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, the United States and the Allied forces were able to start liberating these concentration camps and helping these people come to survival. Many of the accounts that we know about the concentration camps come from Holocaust survivors, okay? And these first-hand accounts, these primary sources, are absolutely critical. Well, the Allies made a pact, all right? It's time to end this war, and they made a elaborate invasion strategy. It's referred to as D-Day, all right? On June 6th, 1944, the Allies, led largely by the American forces, invaded the beaches and stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, and Omaha Beach, and this was the Allied advance that paved the way for victory in World War II. All right, this Allied advance in June of 1944 did not end the war, okay, but it led to the invasion and the infiltration of Germany. It pushed the Nazis back, and it led to our ultimate victory in the year 1945, okay? So that's the gist of World War II. Now, so I would like to now give you some answers, and I'm going to go in order here. Please feel free to utilize the pause and rewind feature. All right, your first question here. Very hard for me to read this. What was a result of World War I? The Treaty of Versailles. Germany takes the blame. Please feel free to pause, rewind. That is one of your answers. Next review question. What was the Great Depression? It was a global economic crisis. Again, feel free to pause and rewind. Make sure that you're getting these answers down. Review question: communism. Guys, we've been talking about this one all year. Communism is a form of government where the government owns and controls everything. Government owns and controls everything. Fascism. You may not have gotten this one exactly, so here it is. In fascist states, the state is more important than the individual. Hey, don't complain about my handwriting. I had to read yours all year, huh? Sorry about that. So the state is more important than the individual. What event began World War II in Europe? Germany invades Poland, 1939. All right, so World War II actually was between 39 and 45. It wasn't until 41 when the United States got involved, and really the fighting started for us between the years of 1942 and 1945. Who were the Axis powers? Review: Germany, Italy, and Japan. The Axis powers. Who were the Allied powers? The USA, Great Britain, Soviet Union, which is Russia. Those are the Allies. The Holocaust, mass murder of Jews by the Nazis in World War II. And last but not least, what happened on June 6, 1944? That was the Allied advance and invasion, called D-Day, paves the way for American victory. Now, I'm not suggesting that you guys watch movies without your parental consent, but there is another World War II era movie. I've already mentioned The Boy in the Striped Pajamas and Schindler's List and the Diary of Anne Frank, the novel. There's also a movie called Saving Private Ryan, which, again, do not watch this without your parents' consent. But I only bring it up because when this movie came out, World War II veterans who were actually on the U-boats and stormed the beaches of Omaha and Normandy, the opening sequences of Saving Private Ryan are the invasion on the beach, on the ground invasion of D-Day, the initial phase. And there were World War II soldiers who had to leave the theater, all right, because when they walked out, people asked them, well, why did you leave? They said, because that is the most realistic recreation. It's like I was there again, and it brought back memories, and they had to remove themselves. So one day when you're ready or interested, Saving Private Ryan is one of those good movies that actually took a lot of history into account when they actually made the film. Now, all that being said, please make sure that you submit the correct answers to me. And again, if you're missing one or two, no big deal. Pause, rewind, listen to me read it, or read my handwriting if you can. Next week and the week after, we're going to be working on a couple of different little projects here, but mostly it's going to be a timeline, all right? And there's a great timeline in your book on page 449 that I'll refer to on that, but it's a good review, too, of events that took place. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, all right? And I hope you're all doing well. I do miss you. I really wish we were able to close out the year together, but the good news is you're in 6th grade, so there's a good chance that I might have you in 8th grade, all right? So stay tuned for our next videos. Hope you're all staying well. Good luck, and may the force be with you. We got this.